Well, I'm a dilettante, but I was very depressed by those last remarks. Can you just take my watch off so I don't run over time? I was on the committee that produced this, and I think it's a very good document, as Ben suggested, Ben Scotch, and I commend it to all of you. I don't really know what to add. I've listened over the last day and last night. Something has obviously gone wrong. This panel is to talk about practice, and I suppose the question is, why is the practice so wrong, and how do we change the practice? John and Jamie Raskin were totally correct. The Constitution is clear. If you look at the history, as it was suggested, it was a total change from the British system. The idea was that we would chain the dogs of war. Congress would declare war. The exception was made for repelling sudden attack, probably only in our territory, though it's been enlarged to ships, forces. That's why we have troops in Taiwan and tripwire. So why has it gone wrong? I once wrote an article called Constitutional War Powers, a flaw, question mark. And I sort of speculated, maybe it was that it wasn't in keeping with the nation-state system. It's a very cruel system. And it has very little to do with sort of the internal working of a democracy. Maybe that's it. It may be that it rests more on the American people. Well, maybe I'll come to that last. The system is certainly an intricate system, the system of checks and balances. The presidents have known how to manipulate it. Now, I am not a person who thinks that America is an empire. I think it's a nation whose power has expanded way beyond what anyone ever expected. I sometimes contrast this with the Emperor Constantine of Rome. He was the Roman pagan who became a Christian. I've often said America started as a Christian society, 13 little colonies on the margin of the Atlantic, and became a Roman Empire. I think our power has grown enormously as a nation, way beyond probably our education to understand it. And indeed, our own way of life, this tremendous material consumption, this tremendous pride in our beautiful houses. You know, Galbraith's book in the Affluent Society, that we put all of our wealth into our houses and that our roads, we have potholes in them. I think it's a very profound question. Now, and not a simple one, quite frankly. I don't think anyone thinks it is simple. How do we get back to where we should be, which is essentially that Congress should exercise its power? The co-chairman of our Constitution Project, Vicki Edwards, who is a Republican, retired #3 Republican leader, I think from Oklahoma, he does not blame the president. He doesn't blame the courts. I don't think he's a lawyer, actually. He blames the Congress. Someone said that Congress had become subservient to the president. He would say they've abdicated their function. Now, why it is, I think it's us, and I'll come to that last. The presidents know how to use this system. And I, in some sense, think of myself as a hawk. I believe in presidential power. I might say I've never picked up a gun in my life, but I'm not a pacifist. The presidents think they're probably doing right, you know. They have enormous power. They have what I call the fait accompli power. When they act, you can't stop them. I was a witness in one of these Vietnam War cases. That's how I learned about Massachusetts versus Later. I can't remember what it stood for. LBJ would say quite often during the Vietnam War, he went into supplemental appropriations and he would say, I need this money, and now you're going to vote it, aren't you? Because you're not going to leave our boys out in Vietnam, you know, without the means. He said, by the way, when you vote for this appropriations bill, I'm taking it as an authorization to use force. And you know, the courts have said you don't need a formal declaration. If the Congress has a meaningful authorization, that may be the same. Whether the appropriations bills are, I don't know. So this power of the executive is powerful, and the Congress has failed to resist it. Now the question is why? And I think, remember Pogo, we have met the enemy, it is us. It's us, quite frankly. And all of you said this, people are distracted. What was the Maryland State song? And the question is, I mean, why has that happened, and what do we do about it? We're an enormously wealthy country. You see it in the health of it. Hey, not in my backyard. Don't touch my insurance policy. You know, I'll tell you a story, and then I'm pretty much done, except for maybe one final thing, sort of the call to action. I have a colleague here. She works, I'm a professor at Georgetown, and she's in one of our offices. And we had lunch about 6 weeks ago, and I said to her, you know, my wife Daphne and I, we'd be happy to tax ourselves to help with health reform. First she said, God bless you. I always get very nervous when someone says that. I remember once when I stood to one side about 20 years ago, I had a woman step in front of me through a door. She turned and she said, God bless you. but we're in real trouble when you get blessed for what you're supposed to do. So she said, God bless you. Then she said, you know, I and my husband is quite a well-off lawyer. We would also be willing to tax ourselves, you know, to reform health. And I'm not sure that's the real guts to reform. Is another issue. He said, but you know, I wouldn't dare say that in my office here at Georgetown. This is a liberal law school. Wouldn't dare say they should be willing to tax ourselves. That suggests something horrendous has gone mightily wrong. Now, what do you do about it? To the barricades, Benson? I'm a conservative Republican. I'm actually on the board of Governors Republican lawyers. The barricades are fun. Swanson will enjoy himself. I've been a lawyer for people investigated by Congress, and they can arrest them. But how are you going to change things? Not how are you going to have good. It's like sort of the sanctions we want to vote against Iran. That's just America working off its emotional steam. I mean, how are you going to change the system, i.e. restore it to where it was? I think it can be done. I have students here. They're still idealistic. They have pretty good values. I've got 3 kids. One of them is Chuck Todd's boss. I mentioned that to the lady. And it's going to be a question, I think Benson will tell you, it's a question of getting active effectively. You should only demonstrate in front of it if you want about Lockheed Martin. And some terrible people work there, and probably some nice people work there. Corporations are us too, you know. Not the banks, but all the other ones. My English aristocratic wife hates banks. Maybe some kind of a prejudice that you ought to examine rather carefully. But I think we shouldn't give up. Of course, you have to. In addition to having those vigils, you've just got to get to work, electing people, working with people, appearing. Why do people object? And I'll quit in a minute. How much time is it? 3 minutes. I'm quitting in 30 seconds. Why do people object to the money controlling politics? Because they feel that corporate types, the lobbyists here, the lawyers, have too much access. You've got to fight for access to these people. I don't think all the senators and congressmen are nearly as corrupt as people think they are. They are overwhelmed. They're believed that they have to spend an awful lot of time raising money. I would not want to be a member of the House of Representatives. An appalling thing, you've got to fly back. I had a friend of mine who was a congressman here from not that far away, and I said to him one day, no longer Congressman Fred, which of the issues you work on is most important to you? He said, you know, Don, if I had more time, I think issues could be one of the most interesting parts of my work. I mean, he just looked back, tending to his voters and raising bucks, and he's actually quite well off. I think the answer is going to be what Benson tells you. I certainly would not despair. I'd inform myself, John, to really know what the situation is. Supreme Court is not a lost letter. I'm nervous because it depends on Kennedy so much. The court has never upheld what Bush did. They merely granted habeas and didn't indicate what would come next. I think you just have to work at the political level, come to law school, bring cases, find guys who are standing. And as someone said before, you just move ahead. And I think we will restore the system eventually. It'll take time. It'll be better in the time of your grandchildren than in your own, but I just would work at it.
Inasmuch as John has to catch a plane and leave a little bit early, I'd like to offer him a chance to answer any questions that you might have specifically for him. So if you have a question for John Bonifaz, now would be the time to ask it. So we'll take 3 questions.
Yes, John, what do you think of the skunk at the picnic's comments on the relevance of the founders to the kind of constitutionalism that may or may not be alive on the Hill today? I would disagree with Mr. Rossiter about his characterization of the messy stuff on the Hill. Other stuff is messy, but there are strongly held constitutional lists or theories on the Hill, especially in the Senate.
But does anyone, okay, another question for John.
Well, one thing that wasn't mentioned at all today was executive signing statements. Basically, given the president can do anything he wants. I mean, the Congress can approve a law, he signs it, but puts a signing statement saying, well, I'm not going to follow this, and this part of the law. What prevents him from doing anything he really wants to do?
Okay, one final question for John? Okay.
Well, I don't hear this mentioned, but we have political parties, 2 of them, that pretty much are machines that run things. I don't feel that Congress is independent enough, and I don't think that anything can happen unless we do something about dismantling their grasp on our political system. So just any response.
Okay, well, thank you for those questions. And I'll be able to stay for 10 minutes, so if I answer these questions quickly, I'm happy to participate in the rest of the panel. Did I get Caleb's current position right, that in the midst of many other things, you are counsel to Congressman Delahunt?
I retired from that position in March. I'm a professor at American University.
Okay.
For 2 years I've been.
Okay, so let's start with what Congressman Delahunt thinks to answer your question here. Congressman Delahunt spoke on the floor of the House of Representatives in opposition to the October 2002 resolution, and in his floor speech, he introduced two news articles that dealt with questioning the information being given by the executive branch and the tailoring of that information to support the policy of going to war. And he in fact quoted one article that said analysts at the working level in the intelligence community are feeling very strong pressure from the Pentagon to cook the intelligence books. He then concluded, we cannot discharge our constitutional responsibilities by allowing the administration to control the flow of information and simply trusting that they know what they are doing. That is an unacceptable situation in democracy, Mr. Speaker, and that is not what the founders had in mind when they gave Congress, not the President, the power to declare war. So at least from Congressman Delahunt's perspective, founders do matter. The framers do matter. So too do they matter. So too did it matter to Senator Byrd. So too did it matter to Senator Kennedy. So too did it matter to Congressman Conyers. If you read the debate, the rush debate, and this of course occurred on the eve of a national election, November 2002, there was a rush debate on the floor of the House and the Senate. There were people who stood up repeatedly from both the Senate and the House who referenced the framers, who cited Madison, who cited Jefferson, who cited those exact quotes I cited. So I definitely take issue with the notion that somehow Congress does not hear what the founders and the framers said when they created Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. To answer the question around political parties, I think that the challenge here is a challenge around the control that big money has over our politics. I don't think it's necessarily about parties as much as it is about that, though I do also agree that in many other democracies we have multiple parties and we have multiple voices, and here we have a system that blocks out those multiple party voices. So I take your point there, but I think the focus in particular needs to be on how undemocratic our current system is when we allow big money forces to effectively control our politics. And then finally, on the question of line item vetoes, I couldn't agree more that there are other unconstitutional actions that have been taking place, are still taking place with respect to the executive branch. Line item, the signing statements being the same. Sorry, the signing statements being an example of that. I don't think, just related to war powers, that there's any way that a signing statement could be held as constitutional, that somehow a president could sign a document saying, well, I'll take us to war on this matter, even if Congress says I cannot. So the War Powers Clause, again, is very clear and is very simple. It makes clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. I'm all for adding further points in which we would strengthen the War Powers Act. I'm all for that, but I just want to come back to the first principle here, that it's embedded in the Constitution itself.